Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested.
And it's Jeremy from Tested.
Welcome to Projections, our final episode of the year, I believe, where we're going to talk about augmented reality or mixed reality this week, and specifically the Magic Leap 1 and some experiences we've played with the Magic Leap 1 since it launched.
We've played it when it launched. We used a lot of the launch titles, and one of those titles was a teaser. It was just an animation from this mysterious title called Dr. Grordbort's
Invaders.
That's it, Invaders, and is by Weta Workshop.
Yeah, right, well, Weta Gameshop, because they built a game studio specifically to make this game. And I went down to LA to preview this game the day it launched. People who have the Magic Leap 1 have been able to play it, but we were finally able to get our hands on units alone and play the game, and we can talk about some of the experience and show you what it's like a little bit, at least with video footage we filmed from the headset itself, what it's like to play a shooter in a very polished shooter in AR.
So if you're wondering what this mysterious item over here is, this is a blaster from the universe of Dr. Grordbort. And it's a universe that existed before this game, but it was never really made into any kind of interactive title. I understand that it's just an invention of one of the employees at Weta, is that right?
Yeah, Greg Broadmoor, who is the art director, who's done things for like the movie District 9, and he's done many things with Weta Workshop. He is the director of Weta Gameshop, and he invented this Dr. Grordbort's world. Let's call him Dr. G for now. His art is his steampunk aesthetic. It's not just the visual aesthetic, but the personality of the world is so rich that they couldn't help but turn it into some type of interactive medium. They're all video gamers there as well. And so over 10 years ago, they sold these as collectible blasters.
Oh, wow.
Out of that world, we borrowed this one from Adam because he collects them. And it gives you a real world representation of what this steampunk blaster could be like. But even though you may have this and it's gorgeous, it's a beautiful hand prop, it doesn't actually fire. And that's what the promise of augmented reality is supposed to bring into the game, into our world, actually. So Dr. G's Invaders is a full-fledged game. I think probably the most complete experience, at least in terms of length and maybe even depth, I've used in Magic Leap.
Of the launch titles, I really like the Seagull Rose app, and that was pretty full-fledged. I mean, it was maybe a half hour long, 40 minutes maybe, but that was as long as they got. Like, there's a nice Create app where you could place things on the wall and characters on the ground, and they would fight and that kind of thing, and that was all very compelling. You could sort of see the promise of the technology, but you're right, there wasn't an app or a game that was the system seller or the thing that made you want to give it to other people and say, you gotta see this. This is totally different and new, and they're pushing this technology in a way that we wouldn't have expected at this level to be possible.
And they've been working with Magic Leap directly with the prototypes and learning along with Magic Leap what works and doesn't work with this headset specifically, but also with augmented reality as a media. Now HoloLens, Microsoft's HoloLens, has something similar to this. They have, I forget the name of this experience, but it's like it's another shooter type game where spiders and creatures come out of the wall and you play it in an enclosed room, and it works to some extent. And the promise of that is that you're basically bringing characters out into your space that you can interact with, and the way you're interacting with it is you're shooting them.
Yes, but they come into your space through the wall.
Through portals.
They open up little portals in the wall, and when you're wearing the goggles, it appears as though that's actually happening in your space. And of course, it's all customized to your space.
That is what this game does so well. When I chatted with Greg and also with Richard Taylor, founder of Weta Workshop, about what makes this work and what are the limitations of this game, because they know, of course, everyone's gonna have a different play space, right? How do you design a game where you don't know what the user's play space is gonna be like? Well, they described it as being akin to giving people the rules and the tools for an activity, an outdoor activity. I can give you a baseball bat and a baseball, but you're gonna need a baseball field to play it in. And you can't expect that everyone's gonna have one, but they would then find the locations to have one. In that same way, they build the rules of this game in the tool sets, but you need to have the right space to play it.
You need to have a certain amount of square footage on your actual wall.
On the wall.
As well as space of the floor.
Yeah.
We should explain what the game is. So if you put the goggles on, the first thing you have to do is calibrate, and you go through this experience, what you're describing right now, and it will tell you to look at the ground, look at the walls, walk around your space. Even if you've calibrated the headset
previously.
like in the system, the game itself needs to go through this calibration phase.
And it's pretty fast. It's like you're looking around much faster than I think the Create app does it. But it actually, in real time, you see geometry popping up. And here you do see the limitations of the Magic Leap in terms of not being able to recognize mirrors or clear glass as solid walls, windows as walls. So you need pretty solid surfaces without things like bookshelves.
It'll think that computer monitors are windows, for instance.
Exactly. And something I quickly realized is if you look at your apartment, if you look at your house, you may have walls with a lot of surface area, but most of the time your walls are not bare. Your walls have something on them. It's actually, it took me a little while to find a room in my house that had the designated space needed for this, and it actually is an overlay. They have these wireless picture frames that pop up, and they say we need a 4 foot by 6 foot area that's blank to map in your space, and it needs to be no higher than 3 feet above the ground, which seems like an arbitrary limitation, but actually ties into how that becomes a portal in your world and how that opens up the world of the game.
So it doesn't actually matter if you have a huge space. You still need empty wall space in order for the game to work. And if it can't find what it needs, it will tell you, maybe you should try another room. And so I did, and in fact, this room was not good because there's so much noise on the walls everywhere that you look. So once you do have your room set up, a portal opens on the wall. Out comes a floating robot.
Gimbal.
His name is Gimbal, and then he brings up a array of weapons. You can choose 3 different types of guns. I started later in the game. You played the beginning, and then I began where you left off. So I had all the guns already. But they have a fire weapon, a grapple weapon, and a force weapon. And they're all these style of guns.
Steampunk-ish, very stylized. They get mapped to the controller, the Magic Leap totem here, and it's pretty well tracked. It's really cool to just hold that gun out in front of you and manipulate it, see all that detail, lots of detail, and even though you want to bring it close to your eyes, it still has the same restriction as the Magic Leap system in that anything closer than about that 18 inches, it'll just disappear and you just get a silhouette of that weapon.
They do an interesting thing where they actually augment the actual Magic Leap controller into 3D space when you're not using the gun. And so it's always something is there and it maps close enough. It's not pixel perfect. Like the drift is present, but it's good enough. When you do have the guns though in real life, in augmented reality, the first time you fire that gun, I found it to be just next level kind of
It's a transformative, immersive experience.
It is really, really different from virtual reality. So you're holding it, the gun is more or less there. It's a little translucent, but it's more opaque than you might imagine. And you fire, and there's this tracer that goes through space, and it's beautifully animated, and then it hits your wall, or your ceiling, or your desk, or your floor.
Or my dog.
And there's an effect as though there's like a burn mark on the wall. And it's like, wow, I just fired a gun in my house.
Right. It's kind of scary because, like, my wife Danica was sitting on the couch and I didn't want to aim it toward her because I was like, I don't feel comfortable aiming it. And one of the reasons they were able to get that fidelity to work so well is because, of course, they know this physical model, the dimensions of it and how you're holding it, and they've matched and modeled the grip of the guns to have the exact same contours.
Oh, interesting.
Here.
That's smart.
So when you're holding it, you're not clipping through the game model at all. Your hand wraps around the game model completely.
And that's a smart move. They also have the grapple gun, as we mentioned. If you grapple your wall and pull it off, you like pull pieces of your wall off. It eventually fades away so that you don't get these all over your room. But it's a really immersing game in that sense. Like you really feel like this is happening in your space. I mean, that's the promise of augmented reality, right?
And not only in your space, but also in a space that's imaginary as well. And I think the game breaks down into maybe 2 types of gameplay, right? There's bringing things that are virtual into your space.
Well, let's talk about how that works. So once you have the gun in your hand, these portals open up again, and it's cool because there's these sparks. Whenever a portal is forming, these sparks fly out. So that's giving you a cue that you got to pay attention because something's going to happen over here.
And that's a compensation for the limitation of the field of view of this headset. Because while you may be looking directly ahead, the field of view of Magic Leap won't let you see what's in your natural periphery.
Right.
And so they have to do things like these spark cues, let you know, and audio cues, of course, to let you know, turn this direction and look at the portal that's opening up on that wall.
There's a stylized arrow that will show up too if there's danger, that will like point you in this direction. It's blue if it's a little bit dangerous. It's red if it's really dangerous. And then what's the robot's name again?
Gimbal.
Gimbal will tell you, at your 6 or to your left. And of course, like it's a New Zealand company, so all these guys are Kiwis. It's a fantastic voice cast, by the way, and it's really well scripted. It's very funny.
Yeah.
But so these robots will come into your world, and you have to shoot at them. And sometimes they have this red armor on. If it's red armor, you have to use the fire weapon to blast it off of them. If it's blue, use the force. You can grapple some of their armor and yank it off of them.
Real location damage. The enemies come in really all different shapes and sizes.
They're life-size robots. I mean, these are as big or bigger than you are.
Yeah, there's human-sized robots that really, when they're in your personal space, when you turn around and you see the robots there, it can be startling.
I fear for my cat because I'm running backwards throughout my living room when I'm playing this
Backing
game.
up. You're like realizing you know your own space. Where's the wall that I can actually push against?
Exactly.
That a portal's not going to come out of.
But you have to find a space that has been scanned, because if you walk backwards into a space that has not been scanned, you leave the game area and the game stops.
There's one aha moment for me, because I have a open floor concept in my house, and there's a wall that my living rooms get scanned in, but it works with occlusion. So it's scanned the opening, and I can actually go between the wall, the doorway essentially, and hide. And the occlusion worked really well.
Yeah, when you scan your room, I mean, with the right room, there's really next level stuff with this game. Like the occlusion stuff is magical.
The couch, they will walk behind couches and you won't see their legs.
Or a table, and of course you can't shoot them either because it's occluded by the table. You'll shoot that instead, so you have to walk around and get them. I have a tiny little patio outside of some windows, and I thought the windows would definitely break it, but I swear to God, there was a robot out on my patio, and I could only shoot him through the window, and otherwise he's totally occluded by the window frame and the bottom of the window, and it just worked perfectly. I don't know how he got out there, but it was really funny. I mean, it really felt like there was this robot in my space.
Which is a difficult AI challenge, right? If you think about it, these robots have to have a logic of understanding what things are occluded. Yeah, they're just kind of marching toward you zombie-like, but some of them, they do throw things at you, like grapple at you, they fire things at you, and so it gets pretty intense.
You're right, so there are a couple different types of weapons. There's a smaller robot that fires these missiles that are slow-moving.
Which you can grapple and throw back at them.
I did not know that. There are these taller robots, and some of them have these magical spheres that they can throw. There's these flying robots, which are just devious. Like, those guys are fast. They're a ton of fun to shoot. When they do get in your personal space, I found I had really mixed feelings about that, because a lot of times they would clip. Like, you wouldn't be able to see the whole thing. If they're really close, they're right up in the range of the field of view of these headsets, and I don't like that. I don't like that I'm fighting the technology, that I want to be able to see more and I can't, and it's actually affecting how well I can play the game. If they're that close, it's hard to play.
When an enemy is this close to you, it's not fun.
Right.
When they're about 15 feet away from you and you can see a human-sized enemy and the full body of it, and even the NPC, even Dr. Grordbort himself, when he's narrating, when you see that, then it feels real.
Absolutely, absolutely. And by the way, there's a whole separate mechanic I didn't even know about because you played the intro and I didn't. I had to text you. I said, how do you pick up robot bits? Part of the challenge of each level is you need X number of robot parts that were defeated using these 3 different guns. So once they fall to the ground, you have to hold up your left hand, or whatever is your non-dominant hand, I assume. So you have the official controller in one hand, and if you hold up your other hand, which has no tracking on it whatsoever, it's purely done with the inside-out tracking of the headset.
The visual tracking, yeah.
A cool, like, Doctor Strange, circle appears around your hand, and you do this awesome thing like from Ready Player One where you're getting the coins, and everything comes to your hand.
And it also becomes a shield as well. You can deflect the blast. So it's a two-handed, it's a full body, game. You're ducking, you're crouching, you're sidestepping, you're shooting, and then you're also blocking. And so it really is, it's a workout.
You do. And so you're constantly reorienting yourself to where these portals are opening, getting through the level. Eventually you reach the end. And oddly, it just turns into a puzzle. You always get this cute little puzzle at the end of a level where another portal opens up with a hatch on it. You grapple it, you pull it out. This contraption comes out of your wall. And then you can grapple onto these different levers and you can press buttons. It's always a little bit different. I don't know if it's procedurally generated or what.
It reminded me a lot of the first Valve VR room experience where you're repairing
the robot repair.
The robot repair. And I think a lot of the Weta Gameshop employees and designers are fans of what Valve have done in VR. And even to the extent that you have physics-based puzzles like with the the portal gun or the anti-gravity gun in Half-Life 2, you have echoes of that, except the fact that now it's interacting with your real space. Now, you alluded to the fact that this mechanism is a puzzle to open up another portal, and that's the second half of this game, where the potential of knowing that you have a big space on your wall lets the game open up another world that you can peer through, and you have perfect parallax to that world.
It's like a door-sized portal that opens up at that point.
Yeah, and those portals get bigger and bigger as the game progressed.
Oh,
to
really?
a point where later on, it is massive.
Oh, wow.
Now, because we've talked about some of the technological limitations of augmented reality, the challenges of different focal planes, right, of the accommodation convergence problem, near field objects are very difficult to get a perfect focus on without having something already locked to that plane. But things in the distance, in near infinity, actually fit in pretty well with your vision of that world. So when you have a portal that opens up to the Invaders world, and it is almost doorway size, and you are 20 feet away from it, it looks convincingly like a window into that world, and you can shoot into it.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And there are puzzles within there too. You have to hit the correct button with the correct kind of gun. You grapple things in that world. Eventually you reach the boss, thing in that, and you have to defeat them. I just want to say graphically, this game surprised me. I did not expect a mobile processor to produce this kind of fidelity. Even like the smoke effects in the buttons that you press when you're calibrating your room, everything about this game, the motion, the texture on gimbal, it all just screams quality.
High production quality.
High production quality.
Yeah.
It's extremely well done. And I mean, the physics, I'm talking about smoke effects that are affected by your space, your tables, your walls, the things that the buttons are surrounded by. It all, lands on and is diffused by your space. And that's what sets us apart. That's what sets AR apart from VR. And I could imagine it being an enormous task to develop software for an infinite number of environments.
Right.
Impossible almost. And so I forgive them when there are bugs. And I experienced my fair amount of bugs. I had robots that got stuck in the portal, so the game stopped. Like I had to find where they were stuck and like shoot between a little hole in order to get the foot of the robot. If you take the goggles off and put them back on, it has to recalibrate. It has to rescan the world, even though it's already done it.
It has to recognize that that's what it had scanned before.
Well, yeah, but sometimes it just wouldn't. Like it would not resume the game. And even though I see that it's been scanned already, it wanted me to continue scanning, and it just said it couldn't find a space that worked, which is odd because I was just playing it there. But the game is so next level in terms of this is a new experience.
Yeah.
That I forgive those faults, and I feel like it's a taste of the future. Because once this becomes robust, once the field of view is bigger, once the bugs aren't there, this is clearly something that people are going to want to do. This is a game that I want everyone to try. It's a $2,300 headset, so very few people are going to be able to play this kind of game. But it is definitely the kind of thing that we are going to be playing over the next several years.
It's magical, and to their credit, they had years to work on this, and to have it as a close to launch title in this launch window is just really impressive. Because even in VR, we didn't have games with this level of polish and this understanding
not this
of
close to launch.
The technology this close to launch. It also makes me think about what multiplayer would be like, what a social experience would be like with this. Is it two people in the same space wearing headsets, seeing the same characters? That's a very logical understanding of multiplayer in AR. Or is it that you're on the other side of the portal and your space is scanned and the portal opens and I get to see you on the other side and we shoot into our other spaces?
Right.
Right? What does that mean?
Because your scan of your environment could translate into something from my perspective. Maybe it's just that warped 3D geometry, but at least I can sort of see your space.
And I can hide behind things, and that's what remote AR could be like. It just makes me think about the potential of AR, which I think all of these launch titles are supposed to do. And it's free, so, if you have the headset.
Right.
Yeah. Also out this week for the Magic Leap and the second wave of these launch games is a small game called Luna Moondust Garden from the indie studio Phenomena. Now, if Luna sounds familiar and you have played VR, there was a VR version with these characters of this game, and they've taken those characters and created what's essentially a storybook experience, an interactive storybook in augmented reality.
Right. And it's not a free app, but it's a cute story of animals and the islands and the gardens, and it's up to you to plant some of these structures for them to play in and see the story evolve, and it evolves based on your pace, the pace that you want to go at. It's a relatively short experience, but it is certainly, an example of what augmented reality can do and how you might translate the VR experience to AR, which is surprisingly different from a fundamental standpoint.
It's to me seemed like it took a lot of what the Create app in Magic Leap did, which was to let you populate your space with objects, with characters, with fauna, and add a narrative to that. And it was a different way of telling a short story. In this case, a fox that needs to find its gardens. And because you're planting the gardens in your own space, everyone's experience of this short story is going to be different. And when we went over to their offices to take a look at some of their design docs, and they had some sketches on the walls, and it was kind of cool to see how they thought about how people would use this, right? You start off with this anchor, this moon that floats above their main story, and then from there, you kind of branch out and you grab, using this device, using this totem, grab these seeds and plant them in spaces. And they won't let you plant on the ceiling. You can't plant on the wall.
Not on the wall.
But you plant on the ground and encourage you then to get up close to it and experience the story from these characters' scale.
And then you
scale.
You sort of collect your resources from the gardens that you've planted in order to plant more.
Yep.
I don't think that the interactivity is off the chart with this title.
Yeah.
It's really simplistic, but it's a nice story. It's pleasant. I would imagine kids would love this app.
That's I think without them saying explicitly, I think that's who they made this for.
But of course, there's age gates for these, just like there are for VR headsets.
So you let your kids wear this.
I can, but there's no science on that yet. I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, there's certainly a world of people out there who have done it, and we don't know if there's anything to worry about in terms of convergence and whether or not the eyes are appropriately spaced for these kind of headsets and what kind of training you're giving your eye muscles. But it's something that the developers of the hardware definitely say is not right for anyone under 13.
Right, right. At least right now. But we know anyone developing for AR has to consider this.
Yes.
They know that eventually these will be devices that kids will use. Just like your smartphone is a device kids use now, what does it mean when you have a whole generation of people growing up with headsets like this, with augmented reality headsets, and you need to build content for them? And it's indie studios like Phenomena who are experimenting in storytelling for I think a younger audience, honestly.
Well, the younger audience is going to need a substantially cheaper headset.
Yes.
I can tell you that from a parent's point of view. It's certainly adults already need a less expensive headset. So I look forward to, I feel like, again, a taste of the future, even more so than VR. This is a taste of what's to come beyond 2019.
And judging by Magic Leap, what they recently did was offer applications for grants for software development, and how many people had applied. Thousands of developers have applied. We know there's a huge amount of interest out there for people who want to develop in AR, and this is just a taste of the things to come. So we're going to end the year being optimistic about augmented reality, excited by the potential of it. We're still, of course, very optimistic about virtual reality, but next year we'll hope to see a lot more. Thank you so much for watching Projections with us this year. We'll be back next year with some hardware reviews, some game demos and reviews, and interviews. And until then, happy holidays.
Happy New Year, everybody.